and we are a very action-packed parsha, a very central parsha to the Jewish people. It's when the Jewish nation was officially formed as a nation. So the exodus from Egypt was the birth of the Jewish people as a people. But as a religion, as a nation of the Jews, it's in this week's Torah reading where we have the Ten Commandments and the Sinai experience where God informs the Jews or sort of anoints the Jews with their title as a holy community, a holy nation, a nation of princes and kings. And we have this special designation. And I'm going to go through a overview of the Parsha narrative and then focus on tonight's class. We open the Parsha with Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, Jethro. Here is about the incredible things God has done for his son-in-law and his people, the Jews, and he says to himself, I've got to join them. We know he was a very spiritual person. He was very engaged in different religions and religious activities, and he had this incredible respect for God in different ways. And when he finds out what God did to the Egyptians and the plagues and splitting the sea and gave manna to the Jews in the desert, he said, "This is something real, and I want to be a part of this." And so he joins the Jewish community. He joins the people in the desert. Now, along with him comes Moses' wife and children, who Moses hasn't seen for a while. Ever since he came to Egypt, you don't want to bring them in too. Hey, John, how are you? Welcome. That was so much. Why not keep us here? Oh, wait, all right. So we're just giving an overview of the parsha here. So he brings Moses' wife, Zipporah, and his two children, and there's a family reunion. And once he comes, as father-in-laws sometimes do, not mine, of course, he goes straight into being judgmental. He says, Moses, you're doing this all wrong. Because Moses is one guy who is taking the responsibility of leadership for the whole Jewish people. Any question they have, they come to him. He's God's man. Now, this is a little bit out of the timeline order, because in truth, this whole episode with Yitro happens after Torah was given, and Moses is a lawgiver, so he is the one who knows God's word better than anybody else. An indication in the text. Yes, the Yitro coming and telling Moses he's doing it wrong actually happened after Torah was given at Sinai, after the experience. It says it was Mimachara from the next day, which the Talmud understands the next day after Yom Kippur, when Moses came to the mountain. And the reason is very simple. Before that, there was no Torah law. Moses couldn't be judging anyone. And once there was Torah law, it was after the Sinai. So the Yitro tells Moses, you have to create a system and delegate. Have smaller courts and bigger courts, and then if there's a need for a Supreme Court, Moses can be the Supreme Justice. But every little question, every little quarrel, every problem the Jews have to come to you isn't sustainable. You're gonna be burned out. The Jews will be burned out. And Moses says, "You know what? Let me ask God." And God says, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And so they follow this new system, and it works out really well. And we have from here also, interestingly, the description of what a judge is meant to be. Someone who despises money and fame and honor. And so there's a great descriptions here about the integrity of a judge and what we look for in someone to serve that position of authority. And it has this little thing. The Zohar asks the question, why is it out of order? Why tell us first the story of Yisro coming? It's unclear if Yisro came before Sinai and then this episode happened afterwards, or only came after Sinai. The Zohar says something fascinating. The Sinaitic experience could not happen until Yisro joined the Jewish people. Yisro brought with him the external culture, different religious experiences outside of Judaism. And only when that was incorporated into the Jewish people, God said, okay, there's certain wholesomeness that now we can introduce the Torah to the Jewish people. It was missing before then, and therefore this passage is put first before we have the Ten Commandments. Then the Jews arrive at Sinai, and they have this preparation. Moses was up the mountain to God, and back and forth, the Jewish people, do you want the Torah? Yes, we do. Whatever God says, we will listen to. And there's this, from when they camp at Sinai, it's 6 days until they receive the Torah. But on the third day, Moses says, you want it? And the Jews says, yes. Okay, we need a 3-day period to ready ourselves. And the Jews prepare themselves with 3 days. They immerse in a mikvah, and they go through this ritual purification. They go through this mental preparation, and they're ready now to receive the Torah. And on that morning, we do the camp on Sunday, and we have the Ten Commandments, which God tells them. And we'll look at the Commandments in a moment. There's another couple of commandments that Jews get. God says, don't make other gods. You have to build a altar for me to offer sacrifices. Build it out of earth, dirt, nothing no other materials. And do not create stairs to go up to the altar. Has to be a ramp. And with that, the Parsha finishes. So that's an overview. Any questions before we dive in?
Couldn't it be that he's just ruling the law based on the partial Torah they had received already? I mean, there's already clearly, it's not like he is a leader. He doesn't necessarily need to be ruling from the whole of the Torah to look at this as just in chronological order.
Possibly.
Can you repeat the question?
As of now, maybe 2 or 3 mitzvahs. We do know that other passages in Torah are definitely out of order. So there's definitely parts of Torah which are out of order. So it's not so crazy to say that. And there's a strange term the text used. It was on the next day, verse 13, page 431. It was the following day.
From the day that they...
So it could be a day that Yitro arrived, but the Talmud understand it to be the following day after Yom Kippur when they received atonement. So could it be differently? Possibly. And there may even be commentaries say that. I don't know.
I read a reading today that actually was totally.
Okay.
And the whole point was that Moses needed to step away from the day-to-day grind to prepare himself for his conversation with God. And it was almost a precursor. It was each sort of creating space for him.
Okay. Possibly, yeah, it's possible what we're reading.
Rabbi, we
Yes.
can't hear the question.
Oh, the question was whether the Yisro informing Moses that he's doing it wrong and creating this system of delegates was before Sinai, after Sinai. In the storyline is beforehand. I shared before the Talmud understands to be afterwards, and Jordan was suggesting that there's a read of the text where it was beforehand, and it makes sense still.
What are the reasons that some of the parshas are out of order?
Okay, so the Torah is a storyline, and but there are some narratives in Torah which are told not in chronological order, where a story that happened first is told second, and the story that happened second is told first. There are various reasons. Sometimes it's clear the reason, sometimes it's not clear. But there are some, I can't think of them right now, but there's some instances where it's very obvious that it's out of order. There's really no way around it.
And the reasons for that?
So it's
Other than
usually
being
a
out of order.
localized reason, where like this specific the reason why it had to be told first, even though it happened second. But the Talmud shares we have a rule, a general rule that Torah wasn't meant to be an accurate historical timeline. It's conveying a certain truth in its own way. It often happens within the sort of storyline. Sometimes it's going to be told in different ways of telling the story.
I understand.
So I want to focus on the Ten Commandments, which is so famous, but yet I think there's a few very foundational details that go unchecked. And I want to look into them today, see what they mean and what they're about. Okay, so just by raising hands, who would be able to rattle off the 10 commandments what they are?
I would probably miss a couple of them.
Okay. So they're so foundational, it's only 10, but we still have a hard time. The truth is, you probably be able to get it eventually. So the first question I want to explore, we're going to look at them in a second and read them. But the few questions I want to look at today is, first of all, why these 10? There are 613 commandments in the whole Torah. At Sinai, God decided to share 10 of them. They were inscribed for posterity on the tablets, which was sort of the holy grail of the Jewish people in the Ark. 10 commandments. What is special about these 10 that made them be the sort of selling pitch to the Jewish people? That's the first question I want to think about. The second question is on the specifics. We're always told there are two tablets, right? If you look at the text today, you may not find that. There is elsewhere in Torah where it says clearly Moses carried the two tablets. Okay, so we know there are 10 mitzvahs, commandments, and two tablets. Let's say something good. Open again? Okay, sorry. So we know there are 10 commandments. First of all, actually, let's lay backtrack a second. The actual term 10 commandments is in itself a mistranslation. Okay? Nowhere in this declaration of God is there a mention of 10. Elsewhere we do have where it says Aseret Hadvarim. 10 things, 10 items. And actually, if you look carefully, according to many commentaries, some say there are 14 commandments here. Some say there are less than 10 commandments here. And I'll give you an example. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Is that a commandment or a preamble? Some commentaries believe it to be just an introduction. It's not a commandment. It's a paragraph. Some guys say, no, it is a mitzvah to believe in God.
Believe, right. This first one is accept this.
Let's look at the second commandment. Let's look inside of the second commandment. And we are now on chapter 20, verse 2. 442 and 443 in the full reading here, but chapter 20, verse 2, it reads, verse 3. Verse 3 here. You must not possess any idols of other people's deities, as long as I exist wherever I may be. And continues in number 4. You must not make yourself a sculpted image, or any type of likeness of anything in heaven, earth, or below, or in the water below in the earth. Verse 5. You must neither prostrate yourself before them nor worship them. These are all part of the second commandment, quote unquote. But actually, there's 3 different commandments. Don't possess an idol. Don't create an idol. Don't worship an idol. And these are listed in the Talmud and in later authorities as 3 different commandments. All in this second commandment. So the truth is, it's not the translation of 10 commandments is a mistranslation. And there should be this 10 paragraphs, or the 10 items, the 10 sentences God gave. So once we've cleared that up, okay, we're still going to call it 10 commandments for simplicity's sake. So we know we have 10 commandments and 2 tablets. That's all we know. How do the tablets look?
According to Charlton Heston, they are shaped like that.
Right. So that hot semicircle on top, there's no source for that in Torah, in the commentaries, in Midrash. There's nothing like that. And actually, it wouldn't make sense because they had to fit in the ark. The ark was rectangle. It wouldn't have fit in the ark with the round top. So that's later. It comes from Christian depictions. You do see it all the time, yes. But there's no Jewish source for it. And actually, another thing, each of the tablets, according to the Talmud, was square. Each one of them was a square, not rectangular, and together making a square. But so that's the actual shape of them. But we're always told that, well, if it's 10 commandments and 2 tablets, we're going to assume each one has 5 commandments. It's always the assumption. Look at any synagogue, you have 5 listed in the first, 5 listed in the second. But that doesn't say anywhere in Torah. We only have the raw information, the data is 10 commandments and 2 tablets. And the Talmud has a debate, of course, with 3 or 4 opinions how the commandments were listed and detailed onto the tablets. The majority opinion, the rabbis actually say, each of the tablets had the whole 10 commandments. And it was like a kind of contract where you make a duplicate. One through each side of the transaction. So God had his tablet with his, and we had ours, and we're making a deal, the covenant here between us and God, and we each have a copy. So there's two tablets. Then I understand why it's two tablets. There's a copy for us and a copy for God. There's an opinion based on the verses that says actually the 10 Commandments were written twice on each. So 20 commandments in each tablet. Must be in the small script. But the most popular opinion, even though it's a minority opinion in Talmud, but it became the most popular and accepted opinion, 5 commandments in each tablet, right? Which kind of makes sense if you think about it. Fair, 5 and 5. Except that it actually is not equal. Because I want you to look at the first 5 commandments, how long the verses are, versus the second set of 5 commandments. So the first set of 5 commandments goes from chapter 20, verse 2, all the way till chapter 20, verse 12. So there's 11 verses here, and quite long verses, right? The second set of 5 commandments is chapter 20, verse 13 and 14. Much shorter. So actually, even though it sounds equal 5 and 5, if you were to divide it in 2 pages, instead of being split maybe the first 3, then the next 7, or 4, then 6. So Rob is asking the chat what language. The exact text we have here in the Torah was the text written on the 10 Commandments. So in the Hebrew. There is a debate in the Talmud which script of Hebrew, how it was written, whether the script we have now or a more ancient script of Hebrew, it's unclear, but it's written in Hebrew in the text we have here. So the second question I want to pose tonight is, if it was divided 5 and 5, why? It's not an equal division. There's a lot more text on the first page and the second page. Why is it even divided on 2 pages in the first 2 tablets? God couldn't fit all the writing on the first tablet. Had to go to the next page. And why this specific division? Any thoughts, initial thoughts?
There could be a hierarchy. I don't know if that really makes a lot of sense, but I mean, the first two are much more conceptual. Even if you include Shabbat, it's not just preserve Shabbat. It's really drawing sort of keeping it holy and making connections to creation. There's something more conceptual. The last several are sort of just like they're just black and white.
Okay. So the first 5 are more conceptual, second 5 are more practical, pragmatic.
Maybe.
Okay.
And aren't 5 of them things we're supposed to do and 5 of them things that we're not to do?
Okay, so the first 5, well, the second, number 2, is not supposed to do, right? Don't serve other gods. Doesn't fit neatly into that list, but that would be a good suggestion. Anyone else?
The last one's all just to tie in, they're more about human interaction. Maybe that's a better way to look at it.
Okay, so the first 5 are more our religious duties
To God,
and the second is our sort of interpersonal duties. All right. It bears mostly up. The only challenge with that would be honoring your parents. So where does that fall? Is that a civic duty or is that a religious duty?
That's another one.
That's number 5. Okay. There's no good suggestion. I want to look at a couple of things in the text itself and then go back to this. Okay. Just before we get into that, back to the first question. Why these 10?
Hold on.
Yep.
I got 5 of them. The first 5 have to do with our relationship with God. And the second 5 have to do with our relationship amongst ourselves as people.
Yeah, good. That's what Jordan said. The challenge to that would be, and it's not an insurmountable challenge, and that honoring your parents is number 5 on the first set. Is honoring your parents a interpersonal mitzvah, or is it a religious mitzvah? Duty to God or duty to other human beings?
Seems all
Somewhere in between, maybe a transition area.
I think that all the mitzvahs are things which have to do with us and God, and then some of them we effectuate between ourselves.
Right, but honoring your parents, which category would that fall under?
I would have thought person to person. I would have thought
Exactly.
that.
It will belong on the second tablet. If that's a division, it will belong on the second set of tablets. Second tablet, right? But if I guess it gets in for the first one.
Bummer.
Okay. So we'll get into in a second. These are good suggestions, and they're going to be important. So let's backtrack a second. Why these 10? So some commentaries feel, you know what? No major reason. It's like a random selection. You do some of the big ones, some of the small ones. Like Maimonides writes, when someone's coming to convert, you can't expect them to fully convert to everything. You give them a selection of some big ones, some small ones. And so here's we're getting a sampling of all the kinds of mitzvahs. Other commentaries suggest, and Rashi writes this, and it's an entire work of Rabbi Saadia Gaon, who lived in I think the 10th century or 11th century, and they say that these 10 actually include within them, if you really analyze them, or they are the foundational building blocks of all the mitzvahs. And here's the work which he teases out all 613 mitzvahs from these 10. So almost like 10 categories, 10 fundamentals, which branch off into 613 mitzvahs. So in that sense, God was giving the Jews a condensed version, like a zip file of the entire Torah. And I'll tell you what's interesting. Christianity kind of took the Ten Commandments as being the only binding mitzvahs, not the rest of them. And that caused a bit of controversy in the Jewish community too. There was a time period in the temple times, they recited the Ten Commandments during the prayers every day. And so we had the Shema, the foundational declaration of faith, in the prayers, and they also said the Ten Commandments as kind of the foundational mitzvahs. And eventually, the rabbis in the Mishnaic period, about 2,000 years ago, felt this is leading to a mistake in the Jewish psyche. Jews are starting to believe these 10 commandments have a greater importance than the rest of the commandments. These ones I have to follow, the rest may be optional. Or these ones are more sort of in a hierarchy of importance, which isn't true. All the commandments from God are equal. And so they actually omitted this from the prayer. So no one should think these 10 have a different, special significance to the Jewish people. Obviously, they do with 10 commandments, but they're not any more binding. And so they took it out. So on the one hand, they may be categories that include everything, but we don't want people to think that these mitzvahs are any more important than other mitzvahs. Keeping kosher is not on the list. It's as important as keeping Shabbat.
And murder? Like, I mean, is that really how it's looked at? Murder and some of the really weird ones that come out about very specific things.
Well, obviously, murder is more important in a society building, in a sort of a moral judgment. Murder is more important than, I don't know, like.
There's some pretty obscure mitzvahs.
Yes. But as far as the fact that each one is God's directive, and therefore we're equally responsible for those that are relevant today, each one has, God wants this, he wants this. There's going to be a hierarchy when mitzvahs are in conflict. Right? Sometimes you have to choose one or the other. And then there may be a positive commandment versus a negative commandment, or a commandment that that affects others versus. So there is going to be a hierarchy at times when there's a conflict. But otherwise, it's not that these mitzvahs we have to do these like if you're going to be a good Jew. Like, each one of them is part of the Jewish canon. Right? There's no getting away. Not that it's all or nothing, but it's not like this. Oh, this is a mandatory Jewish mitzvah. This is like, all right, up to me. So they took it out of the text of the prayers, which is interesting. So we have these 10, and God kind of gave it all to the Jewish people. These are the 10 overarching headlines of Judaism. But he chose to divide it into 2 sets of 5. And here's what I want to get into why. So let's look into the text itself. And if you'll bear with me, we'll read the 10 commandments together. The first 5 and then the second 5. I'm using this translation here, the bold of this translation. If you have a different translation, that's okay. The same points will come across. So in chapter 20, verse 2, I am God, your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slaves. That's the first commandment, correct? Okay.
Sometimes they say, I am the Lord your God, or it's, I am God your God. That's the word.
Yeah, so technically two names of God, Adonai Lehecha, Anochi, Adonai Lehecha. How you translate each one is a big debate. Different names of God. How we translate, what's the connotation? This translation uses both the word God. Some often it's the Lord your God.
Anochi, Adonai.
Yeah. Some actually have the opposite. I am God your Lord, which actually probably makes more sense in the translation. But the different names of God used, whether we translate differently or not, is a question of translation. Yes. I am God, then Elohecha, your God. Okay, that's end of commandment or sentence number 1. Number 2, you must not possess any idols or any other people's deities as long as I exist, wherever I may be. You must not make yourself a sculpted image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or earth below, or in the water lower than the earth. You must neither prostrate yourself before them nor worship them, for I, God, your God, am a zealous God. For those who hate me, who remember the premeditated sins of the fathers, and the descendants, and to the third and fourth generation. But I'm a God who shows kindness for those who love me and for those who observe my commandments. Okay? End of number 2. Number 3, you must not swear by the name of God, your God, in vain. For God will not absolve anyone who swears by his name in vain. Okay? Don't take God's name in vain. Which means, the classic understanding, don't swear falsely, like give witness, testimony, false witness. It can also mean we also don't abuse God's name. When a book has God's name there, we choose to respect. We don't use God's name and say it without purpose. The 4th commandment is Shabbat. Remember the Shabbat day, keep it holy. 6 days you must labor and do all your work. The 7th day is the Sabbath to God, your God. You must not do any work, neither you or your son or your daughter, your bondman and your bondwoman, also not your animal, the alien who is living within your gates. 4, in 6 days God made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is within them. He rested on the 7th day. God therefore blessed the Sabbath day, and he sanctified it. That's the 4th one. The 5th one, honor your parents, honor your father and mother, so that days you lengthened in the land that God, your God, is giving you.
The Sabbath is a different. Honoring the Sabbath is different than 6 days.
No, so from verse 9, 10, 11, all part of one. Yeah. Yeah. Verse 8, 9, 10, 11, all part of the same commandment. So that's the first 5. Okay. Now we're going to the next 5. I want you to think about if there's difference in the structure, the way these commandments are worded, the first 5 and second 5. The second 5 is you must not murder, you must not commit adultery, you must not steal people, kidnap, you must not bear false witness against your fellow man, you must not desire your fellow man's house, you must not desire your fellow man's wife, his bondman, his bondwoman, or his ox or donkey, or anything else belonging to your fellow man. So, on the whole, besides the individual commandments obviously being different, and the themes of them, in the textual structure, in the way the commandments are being told to the Jewish people, do you notice a difference the way the first 5 are structured versus the second 5?
Yeah, like number 13 has multiple commandments in one sentence. And I think further above, each subset of a commandment is broken down to individual lines.
Okay. So one difference is the first set of 5 are actually much longer, and some commandments have a few verses, whereas the second set of 5, the first 4 are all one sentence, right? They're mixed together and condensed. Okay. Anything else? In the structural difference?
Well, there's no explanation. The first is a little more color.
So the first 5, yeah, each of the first 5 has a kind of reason. Right? I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. Don't have any other gods, because I'm a zealous God. Don't take my name in vain, because God won't absolve anyone who says my name in vain. Shabbat, because I rest on the 7th day. Honor your parents, because or in order your life will be lengthened in your land. So there's a commandment with a a reason or a motivation to keeping it. Where the second five is just no. There's no commentary, no context, no motivating factor. Just do it. Okay, that's a
For the
very
second
big
set,
difference.
in the second set, each thing begins with "you must." Excuse me. I'm reading in English. I don't read Hebrew. In the English, it says "you must not," "you must not," "you must not," "you must not," "you must not." Where in the first five, they don't be. Each commandment does not begin with "you must not," "you must not," "you must not."
The second commandment does. You're right for number 1, 3, 4, 5. The second commandment does start. You must not. So it doesn't fit that mold, but that'll be otherwise good. Really, give your hand up.
Oh,
Yes,
you're right. Thank you.
my question, I have two questions, but it's not really what you're talking about. It's in the first commandment, it says, as long as I exist.
Right.
Won't God exist forever?
I
So
wondered
the
the same
simple
thing.
understanding is that means forever. Yeah.
But
Okay,
why would God put it that? Why would God say that? It hints at maybe I won't exist forever. Why would God say that?
Good question. He also says wherever I exist, wherever, isn't he everywhere?
Yeah.
So both good questions. Beyond the scope we're doing right now.
okay. And my other question was in the fifth commandment, it says the word, for I am a zealous God. But as it's being described, it seems that the word jealous would be more appropriate there than zealous.
So the truth is, both are kind of hard words, mistranslations of the Hebrew is kel kana. Kana can mean jealous, can mean zealous. The Hebrew word can mean both.
Okay.
And neither of them fully capture what it's trying to say here, I think. But what the text is coming to say is, guys, that I will hold accountable someone who goes against this. So I guess in this sense, zealous is a more fitting translation, even though it also is not fully accurate, I think.
Okay.
Miriam, your hand up? Or
No,
not?
I don't know why it keeps doing that.
Okay.
What's with the like? That's not a same deal order. So that seems. I mean, first of all, it just goes against the concept of redemption and forgiveness that's given through the Torah. And second of all, like, it's just what that elevates it above the other ones here. It's a strange elevation.
Right. Why is that God says, I want to absolve anyone who says by his name in vain? I don't know. Yeah, good question.
It's a problematic line.
I don't know. We'll think about that. Okay, so I have one more structural difference to add. Each of the first 5 commandments use the name of God, uh, the double name, Hashem Elokecha, God your God, or God your Lord, Lord your God, how we want to translate that. Hashem Elokecha. The second 5 don't have God's name mentioned.
Mm.
It's not don't do this to God, or don't do this because of God, or don't, it's just don't do it. There's no mention of God. The Midrash actually tells an interesting story. It says in the Roman times, one of the Roman generals came to a big rabbi in Talmud. I think it was Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. I forget who it was exactly. Kiva, I don't remember who it was. And he came to him and said, "Why is God not mentioned in the second 5 commandments?" And he said, "Can I tour your villa?" Sure. He took him on a tour through his villa, to his bedroom, the living room. In each room, the Roman general was displaying, look what I have here, my sword. Look at this, my beautiful. And he went through every room and showed him all the beautiful things he had in the room. And then he took him to the bathroom, or whatever it was those days, a bathroom, outhouse, whatever he had there. And the rabbi said, well, where's your fancy stuff here? He says, it's not respectful to bring my any of my, gear or my precious things in this room. They don't belong here. It's a bathroom. So he said, here's the answer to your question. The second 5, God speaking about despicable things: killing, jealousy, lying, stealing. God's name doesn't belong there. So that's how he answered him. Now I think often in these kind of stories of the Talmud, it's almost a way of pushing off the question as opposed to really answering it, right? He wasn't really, I think, interested in getting into a proper answer with this Roman general. It's more here. I'll put him an easy answer. But I think there's more to it as well. Why God's name wouldn't be mentioned in those numbers 6 through 10. So let's take this all, and I think there's many ways to understand this. So I'm just going to present one way, and it's kind of mentioned before, but elaborate a little more. There's two dimensions to Judaism, and often people take one as being more important or valuable over the other, or even some people one to the exclusion of the other. There's the religious elements, which comes with worship of God, the mitzvahs that are irrational. It comes with even the holidays and Shabbat. There's things where I'm doing because God commanded me to. And then there is the moral side of Judaism. Charity, how we treat other people, and being a good, upstanding person. And often you'll find in many communities and societies of Jews, they go into focus on one much more than the other. Right? Some focus much more on Talmud study and on prayer at the expense sometimes of how they treat other people. Others focus on the sort of social justice, moral elements of Judaism at the expense of the religious elements and the worship, the spirituality. Because not that you can't have both, it's very challenging to have both. They're very different. They're not just like, a convenient way of dividing mitzvahs. They're two totally different dimensions to our lives. There's the way I live my life interacting with people. And what do I look at as being the supreme value? As being a good human being, treating others respectfully, being a good member of society, helping others. When I value that, I almost lose anything greater than a human being. The best human possible. But the religious element is a totally different world. It's about transcending my human self. It's about looking beyond myself, connecting with a purpose deeper and greater than anything we as human beings can really understand. And the opposite is true as well. When you're engaged in spiritual activities, when you spend your time with things that are cosmic, you almost lose respect for the very small human interactions. Like, this is not a big deal. It's not important. I'm busy with, we don't busy with prayer. We study in God's wisdom. You want me to care about the poor person in the corner has no clothes? Not that it's not important to me. So it's easy to get lost in either one side of this coin. And then putting the two tablets. If you have
Can you say it again? You broke up. Can you say it again? The last sentence
sure.
You broke up.
If you have one list of 10 commandments, then there's going to be kind of a hierarchy. What comes first and what comes second? And whichever way God splits it, people can say, oh, that's more important. By putting the mitzvah dedicated to worship of God on one tablet, and the mitzvah dedicated to how we treat other people, our interpersonal relationships, our moral compass on a second tablet, we have to be equal footing, where both are given the platform. Honoring your parents, good question. So the commentaries look at this and say a couple of ways of resolving this. Why honoring your parents belongs on the first tablet if it's an interpersonal one? First of all, why do the parents deserve more respect than a regular person on the street? And interpersonal relationships, how I treat others, being kind, being honest, not hurting people, should apply to every human being equally. If I respect the humanity in them, they're equal. But suddenly we say, no, there's actually a couple of people in the world who have a different standard. You have to honor them beyond what is normal. Now, not hurting your parents, don't hurt anybody. Obviously, honoring your parents, respecting them, is above and beyond the moral imperative. Because the moral imperative is to everybody. So honoring your parents, why? So either, it can be understood, some people understand that, You know what? It's actually not so logical. That's a religious imperative. And so, if you had strict logic and ethics, there may not be any reason to give your parents more respect than others. As a child, of course, that may be different because you're growing up, parents are providing for you. But as an adult, my parents, do I need to give them more honor and respect than a person who I'm living with next door to me my whole life? My parents live across the world, like I have nothing to do with them. So why do I have to keep respecting them? So some see it actually is a religious imperative, and because God said so, not because it's a moral or logical one. Others see it as still being a moral thing, but you know why? My parents are the ones that kind of bring me into this world, almost like God in my life.
Right.
They are creator figures for me. And so the reason I respect my parents is kind of part of my respect for God, respect for what brought life into the world. I respect my parents bringing my life into the world. And so
Respect
it's
for
part
creation.
of my religious respect for the creator is respect for my creators, my parents, who get an elevated standard of respect than other people. So that might be why it fits in the first column, not the second. So that explains why the first set of five all mention God's name. You know why you do them? This is for God. These are things you do out of your relationship with Hashem Elokecha, the Lord your God. These are items on the Jewish bucket list that you're doing out of your duty towards deity. The second step, God says, of course, there's still mitzvahs from Hashem. There's still commandments that you do because God said to. But why did God tell not to kill? Killing is bad. It's a morally bad thing to do. So it's not only, obviously, we should do it because God said to as well. Because if you follow just morality and ethics, there are times you say we couldn't kill, right? The Germans, the Nazis, we're very cultured people. And there are all kinds of reasons why the Jews are less than human and don't deserve to live. So just following morality won't work. We have to have respect for God and the mitzvahs to be had. But God wants to do these mitzvahs, they're morally high ground. These are things you should be doing because they're the right thing to do. Don't kill, don't steal, don't be jealous. And no mention of God's name here because it's meant to be teaching you how to treat other people, not just for God. It also explains, I think, why there's a reason given for the first five, not the second five. Because why saying you kill? It's inherently bad. You should understand on its own grounds why you shouldn't be doing it. It's not true at all. It's a human being naturally understands these ethics.
The word about jealousy a little different from the others. Now, requirement gets yourself in that, like it's not really.
Good question. The question was jealousy doesn't hurt anybody. So the truth is,
Sorry, say again.
it hurts yourself maybe.
What was the question?
Who is jealousy hurting? Only yourself. Why is it morally bad?
That's why social the same is.
So there's different understandings of what this commandment is. Many understand that being jealous in its own right is almost like not fair for God to outlaw that. I have to control my jealousy. I see someone with a nice car. I see someone who has life so easy. I feel jealous. You can't blame me for that. So something that only is when jealousy translates into action. When I do something because of my jealousy, that's when I'm going against this commandment. That's really hurting people. Others believe just the fact that they're jealous means you're not respecting your place with other people around you. If I know my place, I have my life, you have your life, it's a boundary I shouldn't cross, I won't be jealous. When I'm jealous of an unhealthy relationship with you, I believe that I deserve things that you have. And so the unhealthiness in the interpersonal relationship leads to jealousy. If other people's life was off limits to you, I have my life. I'm going to feel jealous of that. So jealousy comes from the fact of an unhealthy boundary with the relation with other people.
There's gratitude.
Yes, that's kind of yeah. So the way I think of this division is there's the mitzvahs that are just in the vertical relationship with God. That's the first five commandments, and the second five are our horizontal responsibilities to people around us, right? So that's the division here. What time do we have? Okay, 10 minutes, perfect. I want to finish off with one beautiful teaching that I think ties everything together in a very harmonious way. but I don't want my battery to die. So give me a second to charger. Sorry, I see it's battery's dying here. Okay. So the Midrash says something very beautiful. And why there's two tablets of fire. The Midrash says, you know what? We don't only read the tablets horizontally, we can read the tablets vertically as well. Which means we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The Midrash says God wanted there to be two tablets to link commandment 1 and 6 next to each other, 2 and 7, 3 and 8, 4, 9, 5, and 10. Because they're set. They link with each other. And before I go into how each one links, I want to show one more pattern we have here. In the first set of 10 commandments, starts off with the conceptual, believe in God, don't believe in other gods, goes to speech, and that is, don't take God's name in vain. Then goes to action, Shabbat, honor your parents. The second step goes the opposite direction. Starts with action, don't kill, don't steal. Then goes into speech, don't be a false witness. And then it goes into the last one, is conceptual jealousy. It's about our sort of feelings and sense of self. Emotional. So it's an opposite order, which kind of makes sense because speaking about our worship of God, we start from the conceptual, and that's what it's the basics of, obviously. Then it leads into action. When we speak about interpersonal, that's like, and the first thing is how we treat people in actuality, and then we work backwards into how we look at people internally and jealousy. So just an interesting pattern there. But here's the way. The reason the Midrash says God wants us to read them horizontally, because these two sides of Judaism are not meant to be in isolation, where I have sort of my religious worship and my moral duties. Even having both side by side isn't enough. They're supposed to interplay with each other. And that is, my religious devotion to God should translate into my moral behavior. The reason I behave this way, the reason I'm an upstanding citizen, a mensch, because I have faith. And the other way around as well. My behavior affects my belief. I live a certain way, and therefore I develop certain identity, self-awareness, a faith, because my behavior is reflected internally and creates like these brain paths. So let's look at the 10 commandments, see how they link. The first and the sixth. Commandment number 1, believe in God. Commandment number 6, don't kill. What will be a connection?
God created life.
Why
don't we kill? If you're living in a very moral world, don't kill, because if you kill someone else, then you can be killed. It's almost utilitarian. Let's have utilitarian ethics.
Because God
But no,
created
that's
life.
not gonna work. Don't kill, because every human being is created in divine image. And so if you believe in God, you believe in the value, infinite value of every human being. That's why you shouldn't kill. Number 2, don't create false gods or worship a false god. What's number 7? Don't kill, don't steal. Adultery, sorry, yes. Adultery. What's connecting those two? Don't have other gods. Don't have other women, right? Be faithful in relationship with God. Meaning, not only believe in God, don't have other gods also. Don't have, a side God. And the same is true. Our relationship with God is like a marriage. There's certain faithfulness we have to each other, commitment we have to God. And that translates into the commitment we have to our partner. And don't commit adultery means honor that commitment and don't have something else which can interrupt it. Don't commit adultery. What's number 3 and number 8?
Kidnapping God? No.
God's name in vain
That's it.
and stealing and kidnapping. What would be the relationship to those two? So someone understand this to be very simply. When you kidnap and steal, you're going to end up swearing falsely as well to defend yourself. So it's kind of
Say it
like when you kidnap and steal, when you're not honest, you'll end up also swearing falsely, taking God's name in vain to defend yourself. But I think there's also something deeper here too. Taking God's name in vain means you are not respecting sort of the order. I'm using God's name in places that belong. When things belong to me, God, I can sort of use God for my own purpose. So same thing's kind of stealing someone or stealing something where I'm not respecting that this is mine and that's you. I have no right to touch you or your things, right? It's out of my domain. And so respecting our boundaries with our relationship with God, not to abuse God's name, to use it in places that I want to use it doesn't belong, is to also respect our boundaries with other people, not take their things or kidnap them to take possession of something that doesn't belong to you. Number 4 and number 9. 4 is Shabbat. Number 9 is not to give false witness, false testimony. What will be the relationship to those two?
They're number 4 and number 9, so they line up together.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. That's the relationship I came up with.
So now, keep thinking, why do we observe Shabbat? Because God created the world in 6 days, rest on the 7th. Us observing Shabbat is a kind of testimony. We are testifying, we are bearing witness to the fact that God created a world. It's our way of showing an honest, or projecting an honest perspective of the world. We are bearing witness to God being creator and resting on the 7th day. Not observing the Shabbat means almost giving false testimony, saying, I don't need God. God didn't create this world. I am a creator. And so that plays out in interpersonal relationships of lying in court, of giving false testimony, misrepresenting how things happen and the world around us. So observing Shabbat is a representing the honest or the truth of creation, and that plays out in representing truthfully in court under oath or whatever happened. Finally, number 5 and number 10. Honoring your parents and not being jealous.
Gratitude, man.
So at a simple level, we have gratitude. I'm grateful my parents bring me in the world. And the reason I honor them, I owe them I owe them my life. That is the fact they brought me into the world, created me literally. They brought me up mostly. Most people's parents are the ones that raised them, gave them their footing in life. So we honor as kind of paying back that debt of gratitude. And the opposite of gratitude is I want things that aren't mine. Not being grateful for what I do have leads me to say, oh, I want things I don't have, which is jealousy, right? Another way of looking at it is we honor our parents as kind of a religious duty, right? We said before, honor our parents is kind of respecting ourselves, not even for our parents' sake, for my own sake. Recognizing I come from somewhere, recognizing that I have roots, right? And that not only out of gratitude, but out of kind of respecting the place I come from. Realizing I'm rooted somewhere in my parents, literally their DNA, but also in their ideas and ideals. I come from somewhere. I'm not just floating in a world out of nowhere. I have a place. I have a certain life that I was born into to meet. I don't want anything, be anyone. I'm only one person. And I get that person with my parents. I'm rooted. And I don't think people are like, why do I, from kids, like, why do I need to be Jewish? Because my parents are Jewish. What does it do with me? And then it's as simple as whether you like it, it is you, right? You are this link in the chain. You're born rooted. You're not born sort of free to roam the world wherever you want, as in conceptually. You're born in a certain space, to a certain family, in a certain time in history. You're rooted in that self that is meant to guide you in how you live your life. And jealousy is this feeling of unmoored, where you feel kind of, I could have anything. And I always want to have everything that I see, as opposed to realizing if I have this life to myself right now, I can, it's not even like gratitude, it's like, this is what I'm supposed to have. I can do well with this set of circumstances. I can live well, be happy with what I have. So it's a feeling, the destiny of the life that it has manifested for me until this point is meant to be this way. As opposed to jealousy, which is saying, things could have been differently. I could have had that. If I was born to a more wealthy family, I would have more opportunity. If I would have had taken that job, I could have had my neighbor had. So it's the sense of honoring what you have, honoring the place you're in, and recognizing this is who I am, what I'm meant to be, where I'm meant to be. So let's just to recap and to give a synopsis. The Ten Commandments are a sort of a microcosm of the entire Judaism. In these Ten Commandments is the root of the rest of the mitzvahs. And the reason the vision on 2 tablets, if we understand it to be 5 in each tablet, it may be intended each tablet as sort of a receipt for the contract. But if 5 in each tablet, the vision on a wholesale level is between our relationship with God and responsibility to our vertical responsibility to our Creator versus our horizontal responsibility to our fellow human beings, interpersonal. And they're put on separate tablets to show each one is integral to Judaism at equal footing. But not only side by side, they actually play off each other. And the spiritual domain is meant to inform our relationships. Our relationships are meant to be resulting from and also inform our spiritual relationship with God. And a wholesome Jewish experience is when we can marry these 2 things, where my religious life and my interpersonal life are not existing side by side, but they're in sync with each other. And they're playing off each other. And that's the wholesome Jewish experience, where our spirituality is invested into our material moral life, and our moral life is rooted and interplays with our spiritual relationship with God.
One of the prayers we say unite the upper realm, Yud K, and the lower realm, Yud K. And it sounds like the first 5 exist at the upper level, they're godly. And the second 5 are more at the physical realm between people to people. And as you were saying, we're supposed to infuse both of them. Is that relate to uniting the upper and the lower realms?
Yes, on some level. It's not exactly the Yud K and Vav K have both sort of God's names, but yes, on one level, how that plays out is yes, there's our sort of our upper dimension, our spiritual life, with our material engagement, and the goal is to merge them and to have them in sync. Yes, it's related to that.
Let's go on more question. That's always that question I never thought of until your presentation. In the Noahide laws include establishing courts of justice. Later in the Torah, it says, justice, justice you shall pursue. But in the 10 commandments, and I understand what you're saying, it's only 10 of them, but in those 10, it doesn't say establish courts of justice. And justice is so important in our religion, in Judaism. Why was it not included in the 10?
Good question. I don't have a good answer for you on the spot.
Okay.
Why? I don't know. I know. I tell you that we can study sort of how all the mitzvahs are rooted in these 10. Why weren't others chosen and these were? I don't have an exact answer. I don't think the top 10 list, right? If we're giving top 10 mitzvahs, first of all, like I said before, we're kind of steering away from this notion of being a top 10 in the first place. But even if there were to be a top 10, I don't think it would be done, right? I think there's more to these are maybe inclusive mitzvahs which can carry much more with them. I don't know exactly a precise formula why these 10 and not others. And they got a cut.
Because the Noahide laws include do not steal, do not kill, I think. Okay, so there's some that do repeat.
Yeah, there's some overlap. Also belief in God, There's some overlap in Noahide laws, Ten Commandments, but they're not exactly the same.
Right,
Yeah.
the Sabbath is not in the Noahide laws.
Yeah,
Thank you.
eating, the limb of an animal, a live animal, is a Noahide law. It's not in Ten Commandments also.
Huh, and yet kosher is
Ten
so
Commandments.
important.
Any other questions? All right. Fantastic. Thank you for joining here.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry. I'm sorry, I got on a little
Yes.
bit late. I don't know if it's a real question, but I like to kind of like draw parallels to what's going on today, right? And I find it interesting how number 1 and number 6 are have faith in God or believe in God, and then number 6 being don't steal, don't kidnap. And I feel like with what happened in the hostages and everything, how that challenges people's faith. How do you feel about that?
Because number 6 is actually don't kill, which is the same, October 7th was a lot of murder. So the same idea. And I think the don't steal is correlated number 8.
Oh, sorry.
Which
Okay,
correlates-
sorry. We got that.
Yeah,
Okay.
correlates with don't think God name in vain.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, obviously, when we see not just injustice allowed to happen in the world, always going to be across the face. More than that, when we see the injustice kind of getting a pass and not getting called out by people we expected to, I think more than a crisis of faith internally, it leads to the breakdown of sort of faith in society, right? Where's it coming from that certain people, the double standards, but these people, if they're killed or kidnapped, get lesser value than others? I think that comes from the reason we're respecting human beings is not because of the divine image in the human being. It's because we relate to them and we feel them. And the people who are on our team, quote unquote, will give more credibility and value to their struggle versus people that we don't feel to be the oppressed. So there is I think it says more about kind of a breakdown of faith in society at large, which leads then even the moral values we do have to be fundamentally skewed because they're not founded on the principles which create this universal morality. And so when you reason killing is bad, and you see it through a lens of whether it's the oppressed versus the oppressor, or you see it through a lens of race, or any lens that is sort of contemporary, as opposed to seeing through a timeless lens of each human being is created in God's image, and therefore every human being has equal status and is equally horrific if anything happens to them. So then it skews your